Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for August 2nd, 2021. On Saturday, July 31st, the Schiller Institute sponsored a conference, a highly successful conference on the discussion of what to do in the aftermath of the decision to remove the U.S. and NATO forces from Afghanistan. The conference was titled Afghanistan at a Turning Point in History after the failed regime change policy. The topic is an essential one because the question is, what will the policy be now? Will it be to abandon Afghanistan to a situation of civil war, opium production, and so on? The crisis in Afghanistan is definitely building. The Taliban are on an offensive, fighting the government. But what we intervened to do was to bring forward a discussion process about how you can make the priority putting development on the table. Pulling out is not a solution. Leaving the situation in a war-torn mess is not a solution. And what Helga Zepp-LaRouche emphasized in her keynote is that the key to this is a development perspective. Along with a comment from Hussein Askari, the EIR Middle East correspondent, who said that the key is keeping the warlords out and the British out. Now, one of the more important presentations was by Professor Pino Arlacchi, who had been from 1997 to 2002, the executive director of the UN Office for Drug Control and Crime Prevention. He also served as a key official at the European Union Parliamentary Office in charge of Afghan policy. Now, he reported that his office had originally developed a plan to eliminate opium poppy growing in Afghanistan. And this was put in effect in the beginning of 2001. Actually, it was put in effect a little bit before that. But by 2001, the poppy production had been reduced by 80%. But this was reversed when the U.S. and NATO decided to go into Afghanistan, invaded Afghanistan after the September 11th events. And he brought it forward again in 2010, when he was the European Parliamentary Rapporteur on Afghanistan. But the second time, it was blocked by the European Union, by the United Kingdom, and the United States. Now, one of the things he pointed out in his presentation is that the total income for farmers in Afghanistan from the poppy crop is $300 to $350 million. And if that could be replaced with funds that would allow them to shift from opium production to food production, you could put an end to the production of the opium and significantly cut back heroin distribution. Because the real money is in the organized crime networks that take the poppies and turn it into heroin and distribute it through Russia and Western Europe. So this would be a way to cut back opium production, heroin production, and also attack the organized crime networks in Europe. Now, to do this, you're going to have serious diplomatic initiatives. The Taliban is visiting China. There are initiatives from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and other groups. But what Mrs. LaRouche said is, let's use Afghanistan as a way to develop or to show that development is the real name of peace. And the Executive Intelligence Review is putting out a special report titled, Will Afghanistan Trigger a Paradigm Change? And that's available at LaRouchePub.com, LaRouchePub for publishers.com. Now, at this conference, by the way, which you can see on the Schiller Institute website, the whole conference has been uploaded for you to get to at schillerinstitute.com. In addition to Helga Zepp-LaRouche and Professor Arlacchi, the Afghan ambassador to Canada spoke. There was a representative of the Russian mission to the United Nations, Anna Evstigneva, who spoke about how transport and infrastructure are key to the stability and the transformation of Afghanistan. And she emphasized that there is no military solution. Haven't we learned that from the 1980s, where the United States was conducting a proxy war against the Russians who had invaded Afghanistan, against the Soviets? Haven't we learned it from the 20 years of futility of the U.S. deployment there? If you're not going to have a military solution, what's left? Economic cooperation. Also speaking on this was Dr. Wang Jin of the Schiller Institute in China, Hassan Daoud, a Pakistani trade official, who spoke about how Afghanistan can be a logistical hub connecting the Belt and Road Initiative to the West. Also, former CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who is a co-founder of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. One of the points McGovern made is that there must be accountability for all those military officials and political officials who put out repeated lies about the military situation in Afghanistan, which kept us there for all those years at the expense of American lives and money and a huge cost to the people of Afghanistan. Now, the Russian ambassador emphasized a point made repeatedly by Helga Zeppler-Roush over many, many months, which is it's important to rise above geopolitics and instead to cooperation. And Arlaki, in his comments later on, said, let's be more courageous and stop being a victim of huge deceptions. Now, what this means is we have to overturn the central argument that's been used by geopoliticians, that if you want to have development, you have to have peace first. And if you want to have peace first, you have to defeat the enemy. Well, it's not possible to militarily defeat the Taliban, as we've learned from the extensive deployments into Afghanistan. And that's the British approach. You never get to peace. But Lyndon LaRouche made a counter-argument. He said, put forward an economic development perspective, number one. Number two, start moving the earth. Build transportation and water systems, power plants, hospitals, so that you change the situation internally that will, number three, improve conditions. People will see the improved conditions, and this will build trust. This is the way you overcome a situation of permanent warfare, permanent destruction. And in this sense, Afghanistan could then serve as a model for a policy of mutually beneficial economic cooperation. Now, again, I would urge you to watch this event. Watch it in full at schillerinstitute.com. We're dealing with a situation in the world which is pretty tricky right now. We're caught between the recognition that militarily the idea of shifting from Afghanistan and the Middle East into the South Pacific, or the Indochina region, the Indo-Pacific region, to confront China and Russia, also in Eastern Europe, this is not a viable option. The costs are prohibitive. The advances in Russian military technology and China military technology, plus the benefit or the advantages that China would have logistically if you went to war over Taiwan or the South China Sea, make it impossible to win a military victory, short of using nuclear weapons. So therefore, instead of pursuing these utopian policies of bluff and military deployment, instead, let's try diplomacy. Now, this is a tough situation to get Americans behind because Americans are somewhat tired. They're moving into what they think Trump meant by America first, which is isolationism. That's not what Trump meant. He meant we put the interests of the American people first, which means end the wars, which means fund infrastructure, fund development, and negotiate with the Russians and the Chinese. That's what Trump meant by put America first. But because of the incredible power of the so-called deep state, it became impossible to change this. And so what's necessary now is to move out of the era of geopolitics into the era of cooperation and development. And to get a good sense of that, I urge you, go to the schillerinstitute.com and watch the deliberations from last Saturday. It probably will give you some hope It means you'll have to suspend for a moment your cynicism and pessimism, which has been built by the frauds and the failures of the deep state. But that means they're vulnerable. We can defeat them. And we can defeat them with a coalition of nations, the neighbors of Afghanistan, who want to have economic development. So join us at theschillerinstitute.com, watch the video, and I'll be back tomorrow for another update.